the Gateway School District Building and Grounds Committee meeting. Today is August 13th, 2019. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Short.
Thank you, Mrs. Cerrucci. Tonight's Building and Grounds meeting basically allows for the administration to present to the board and our constituents in the communities of Monroeville and Pitcairn the culmination of a facility study that was enacted by our board back in November. Just so the public is aware, this process of examining multiple facets of our district in terms of aging facilities, recommended possible reconstruction / new building has been ongoing for probably 6 or 7 years, maybe longer. We've examined both Gateway Middle School and Mosside Middle School during this process. Last year in June of 2018, I provided a public presentation on the entire district K-12, including population trends, demographic information, analysis, enrollment projections, also laying out a number of different scenarios. And whenever I say scenarios, multiple scenarios that were provided to the board in consideration for our next steps as a district. At that time, we concluded that it would be best to look at multiple architectural firms to come in and conduct a feasibility facility study. The central administration got together, and I know Mr. Schott had contacted or went out for,
We
advertised for it, and I believe we interviewed 4 firms and moved forward with Architectural Innovations, which the board approved in November of 2018. From there, first thing I would like to do is just commend all the central office personnel, building principals, teachers, staff. Everyone had input during this process. Multiple meetings were held. I had Mr. Brown collect some data the other day, and I believe we had at least 10 different meetings with Architectural Innovations, not including the multiple walkthroughs, presentations, individual meetings held with building principals over the course of nearly 4 to 5 months. Architectural Innovations did come in and present findings to the administration. I was able to share that with the board, but also we wanted, meaning the administration, to get together to share at least the recommendations from our angle of the information moving forward, understanding that the financial limitations of a project renovation or building had to be considered. We all understand that we are financially responsible to the taxpayers. We are in excellent financial shape, and that is largely in part due to the board, central office, Mr. Schott's work, and including our administration and building and grounds coordinator, Mr. Bob Brown. We also understand, and I think all of us agree, that the 2 buildings that are the focus of this study, Mosside Middle School and Gateway Middle School, have had multiple Band-Aids over the years. And we are reaching that point where I feel, and I think everyone feels, we need to make a decision at some point. So throughout this review tonight, we will examine the findings, but also narrow in and laser in on one of the recommendations we're going to make to the board in moving forward over the next 2 to 3 year process. With that said, everyone should have in front of you the actual agenda with different artifacts from the study. The goal of this project was to develop a comprehensive facility study to analyze options for Moss-Side and Gateway Middle School. The methodology for this process, when we got together with Architectural Innovations and the CEO, Jan Brimmeyer, was to really follow the PDE guidelines for facility studies. Central administration and investigation and research helped with this study. It was able to, or we were able to provide Jan and her firm with a lot of information to help speed up this process, recognizing that time is of the essence, especially with our buildings. So from the last 3 to 4 years, we were able to gather that information, share it with Jan. She had a number of different questions pertaining to whether or not it was Mr. Telly or Dr. Noor or also Mr. Brown. So we were able to get the information in the hands of the experts ASAP. If you notice on letter B, where we have building level capacities, I have in parentheses where it states AI. That is Architectural Innovations, and the Roman numeral V, including the page 5.1. For our viewing audience, and I know seated next to Mr. Telly, I'm making a little joke there. We have the binder, which is pretty thick, that we will be able to list online after tonight's meeting, so everyone will have an opportunity to view that. If they have any questions, certainly we would be here to answer that. But within that packet, you will see the Roman numerals and the pages that correspond to each and every one of those letters. Building level capacities, demographic analysis, including enrollment projections, which is mandated through the guidelines of PDE, which do go out probably 20 years. Building reconfiguration scenarios, which is Roman numeral 8. And if I can simply review for the public and our board the 3 options that we were looking at. A, tear down Moss-Side Middle School. Build a new building on this campus to make it a campus-like setting. During that process, selling Gateway Middle School. Another option would be improve both facilities, Moss-Side Middle School and Gateway Middle School, up the code. Option 3, of course, would be to reconfigure Gateway Middle School into grades 5, 6, 7, and 8, while also renovating the complex over at Gateway Middle School. All 3 of those options you will see within the actual methodology and facility study. The financial impact of this, and I've had multiple meetings with Mr. Schott concerning the stability of the district in terms of finances and looking ahead, and more importantly, the bond market, which you will have more information about later on. But if we could go into the actual process overview for the feasibility study, as noted, thank you, Micah, Architectural Innovations was hired to conduct a study on November 18th. The facility assessment, the physical conditions analysis, if you turn to the pages within your packet, you will see multiple pictures representing Gateway Middle School, and that'll be our focus at this point moving forward. It would be the recommendation of central office, the administration, that at this time we laser in on renovating Gateway Middle School. We understand that the 360 group, their contract is up at the end of August. September 1st. So at this point in time, we have received very few offers. We do understand the process and the problems associated with not having it zoned commercial. We believe that that has hindered the potential buyers for that project, for the building. Understanding that we cannot wait any longer we have decided to make the recommendation of narrowing on renovating Gateway Middle School. Mr. Brown, can you highlight for the board the analysis of the building at Gateway Middle School, not examining each and every issue? However, the board does have that in front of them.
As the study shows.
Could you go up to the mic so the folks can hear, please?
We
I
were
think
waiting
it
for
does
that.
that just so,
Yeah,
just so
yeah.
Mr. Ritter can point that out.
As the study shows, if you read through it, there are many deficiencies throughout that building. Due to age, primarily, all the heating systems, HVAC, electrical, plumbing. As you go through it, you'll see that almost every aspect of that building is at or near the end of its life. The roof is one of the primary things that is totally in need of replacement. We have asbestos throughout the building, primarily in floors, that needs to be abated. The classrooms themselves are just, there's security issues that we've all known that, that are there, and we've been kind of holding off until we get this in place. So the entire building is in need of upgrading. In all of those areas that I spoke about, as well as all the lighting, which we've done at every other building to save energy cost. So there's all these little things put together that turn into large dollars. So, and then when you go outside of the building itself, then you have all the field aspects and the repairs that are necessary just to get them up into the areas as far as the track, just to be safe. It's been many years since anything has been done over there, so that's why their study is pretty spot on if you read through it.
Especially pages 6.7, going into pages 6.8, you will see an itemized list of physical conditions, the analysis, and it really highlights everything that Mr. Brown was saying.
Yeah, and it does take into effect every different area of the building, from the administration office, nurses' suites, the public use areas, the classrooms. So they've done a pretty comprehensive job of what's there. Their assessment of some of the conditions, it is subjective, but it's fairly close. I don't think that anybody would find any major or drastic problems with it. It's right there, and it's telling us that we need to do an upgrade.
One of the more striking things that came from this study was one of the first slides that Architectural Innovations put up there on the board was President Eisenhower. And that started the conversation by indicating that, how many of us in this room were alive when President Eisenhower was in office, and that's when the building was constructed. And that was a telltale sign. Scotty?
Bruce was alive. Let's not name names. Nobody wants names.
Now, understanding that our maintenance and building and ground staff has done an excellent job of maintaining. We've
Just so you know, the slogan was, "I like Ike."
I like Ike. You've been to the button. Lockers have been painted over the years. There's been a few additions, the latest being, Mr. Telly, 98 that we added the wing, or? 98. So when you walk the building, what we talk about, the bones, it looks good. There are different elevations as you walk through the building. However, on the exterior, you do see an aged look of the brick. A lot of the brick is cracking, it's falling apart. Exterior-wise, there's still always the issue of, okay, when you drive up into the campus, some people confuse the auditorium with that of the office. The sidewalks are pitted. falling apart. There's a lot of work that needs done, even on the interior of the building. When you walk into the classrooms, which are large, which was one of the main reasons for moving in that direction of maintaining Gateway Middle School. I believe the average, don't quote me, about 800 square feet for a
Little
classroom.
over.
Is that about right? Large classrooms, which is beneficial. But also, interior-wise, within those classrooms, you do see some aged ceiling tile, lights, the floor which has been carpeted over,
Yes.
correct?
The hallway floors have
Yes.
been carpeted over.
So there's a lot of room for improvements on this, but you can see the comprehensive list created by Architectural Innovations of the concerns of the building.
Right.
So at that point, one of the other interesting dynamics that Architectural Innovations brought to us was to really look at the programming. And when we say programming, the curriculum, the materials, the classrooms that we utilize in a 21st century classroom. And not only in today's world, but where do we see STEM education moving to in the next 5 to 10 years? Because that's something we want to get ahead of to ensure that we're offering our students the best learning environment. I have to commend Mr. Tilley for leading that group. He spent a lot of time with his staff questioning, what's the next step in the curriculum process? Where do we see middle school learning headed towards? Rocco, do you want to provide an overview of how you were able to talk to your staff and then relay that information to AI?
So working with Jan and her group was a great experience, and it was very exciting for people who have been in our building for 15 years plus. We formed important members of each department and received their feedback as far as what they would like. Myself, Dr. Jakey, Dr. Rossi kind of put our heads together and tried to create a vision of what we want classrooms to look like, and that little summary is in your packet as well, just as far as what the learning environment is that we're trying to achieve. One of the largest obstacles in working in a building that was constructed in 1954 is that it's very institutionalized. There's not a lot of creativity oozing from the walls and the hallways and the learning spaces there. So the firm that we worked with was real receptive as far as trying to get out of us a lot of the creative ideas that we don't currently have in place that we would like to go to. Common spaces, spaces that are multifunctional as far as what the current initiatives are in education, whether they be STEAM now, whether they be something moving forward in 20 years, because you want it to be long lasting. One of the major things that came out of this was what is desired as opposed to what we currently have. Right now we're operating at about 56% capacity, I think the report said, somewhere in that ballpark, which makes it very possible to make some of these changes with the kids still being in the building, but it also shows you that if you're operating at that level of capacity, the amount of additional space probably was overestimated initially. And I believe Dr. Short will go into that.
One of the outcomes that they refer to as an executive summary, the space that they were recommending included PDE recommendations for additional students in the future. However, when we examined the internal space that, of course, they were recommending, I believe the cost for a recommendation came in with and I know I asked you this, about 28% soft cost that they added in there. The actual renovation came in at $48.5 million. With the soft cost, they were estimating around 65 million. We thought those costs were difficult to agree with. And I think when we shared that out with the board, they were somewhat skeptical of the cost for a renovation. Our marching orders, and I kind of agreed with the board, we wanted to then go back to the table, myself, Mr. Telly, Dr. Rossi, Chakey, Mr. Brown, got together and really narrowed in on the square footage. And this was the recommendation provided to us from Architectural Innovations, where if we want to reduce the estimated cost of that renovation, we had to reduce the amount of square footage. We spend multiple hours examining 1.20, and that was the recommendation. And if you turn to page 7.8 in this handout. That was the what we called the four finger. Rocco, correct? That was the initial drawing and programming recommendation. If you could visualize that building, we would be eliminating that, is that the 100 hallway?
Yes.
Taking out some classrooms while jetting out onto the grassy area adjacent to Route 48. And I know Micah's going to be putting up a picture. Go to 7.8. Right there. That was it, right there. Yeah, and if you could drop down to the one that has listed the classrooms and blow that one up a little bit. Nope, go back up. Right there. Right there. Yep, blow that one up a little bit. Now, examining this building, you will see that, and perhaps Rocco, you may want to get up to the board there and just kind of indicate where the original office, your office, is located, the changes that were recommended, meaning the hallways eliminated.
So one of the major things that we liked about this was the centralizing of the main entrance. Right now, if you pull up the gate of the middle school, the auditorium looks as though it is the main entrance of the building. The administrative office would actually have sat up here, which is no longer there, because when you enter in that auditorium lobby, that's the 200 hall of the building. So what would end up happening is the 100 hall would basically be removed and replaced with wings. Now, what is nice about this is when you're in a 5 through 8 building, the initial drawing here shows 4 wings, which would be 1 per grade level, which would still allow you to maintain the integrity of a 5th grade setting, a 6th grade setting, while you're still with 7th and 8th grade. The other positive of this that Mr. Brown and myself both really like is the fact that the core academic area is separate from the more public use of the building. So when Mr. Brown is using different facilities for outside groups, they can access this part of the building in the evening hours and not disrupt any of the classroom spaces, which is preferable from a building standpoint as far as teaching and instruction goes.
Also, the courtyards, which have been in place probably since 1954, are pretty much dead. 59 or 54? Stone says 54 in the building. So. The courtyards have been in place for a long time. They're tough to get to, tough to maintain. You do not want the activity of cleaning during the school day or maintaining those. The concrete's old, cracked. Grass. Yeah, grass. So.
And this option provides us with the ability to maintain an outdoor space while still having access to it from the outside.
If you notice down below, we have expanded, the recommendation was, of course, the kitchen and the cafeteria. We see, with the addition of 2 more grades, the need for an expanded cafeteria. Currently, right now, there is a little courtyard, small little strip area that goes back in. Mr. Telly had that idea of connecting that cafeteria to the rear of the auditorium, thus allowing access in and out from two different hallways. Also, we plan on flipping where the kitchen and the cafeteria is. We felt that even from our visits to Montour, the location of the kitchen is critical for the loading dock, the unloading of materials, resources, etc.
You want that on outside?
Exactly, yes. The tech ed area, we have been able to cut up into a different format, thus eliminating square footage. Rocco, you may want to talk about the fingers a little bit and how we were able to reduce square footage.
So in the beginning of, I would say, June, one of our meetings led to how much reduction in square footage could we have. And in essence, and gentlemen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was 12 classrooms.
Reduction.
Yeah, we were able to reduce from the initial drawing, which is a substantial reduction, and still have space that is available. When you calculate capacity of the building, you calculate usage of each classroom throughout the day. So if the classroom is empty, that contributes to the lack of fulfilling the building's capacity. But what would end up happening, ideally, is we currently already have 3 wings that come off of this 200 hallway, and it would be an extension of those 3 wings while still maintaining the integrity of this center hallway with classrooms because of some of the adjustments that we would make to some of these spaces.
We have included within our adjusted map the auxiliary gym, including access, outdoor access for bathrooms. In case there's, and we do know that we have multiple events, either at the baseball field, the track, the football field. However, we have porta-johns out there right now. So included within this drawing would be the doors, the accessibility to go into the building, strictly to use the bathrooms from the outside. New gymnasium, auxiliary gym would be included. I often describe walking into that building, especially the gymnasium, it's like the movie Hoosiers was shot there. I mean, it's that old. Did we miss anything on this map? Refreshed auditorium, really acoustical panels, seating, stage.
This all remains one level, yes.
Yes, we eliminated that idea of going vertically. That's correct.
And every firm that we met with loved the bones of the auditorium. You know, it's a great space, especially for that middle. The other feature that we never talked about this evening is the safety aspects. With the improved traffic flow due to the hallways and due to the cafeteria and things of that nature, it allows for more ease of access throughout the building, escape routes, fire exits, things of that nature.
If the board would decide to go down this route, we have already estimated the phasing time of this. We do not see an impact of any loss of academic or instructional time. We feel that we can operate the existing buildings, the 5, 6, and the 7, 8, while construction is going on, very similar to the high school renovation that happened nearly 15 years ago. So there would be no need to alter our current existence until we're ready to make that transition with the 5th and 6th graders over to Gateway Middle School.
Now, this is your thoughts, this is an AI's?
AI gave
Yes.
multiple options.
Yes.
And prices.
This was the one option that we decided to go with.
Just the 62?
This was a 62, however, we have narrowed down the square footage, and we are estimating that we can get exactly what we've talked about here with the reduction of 12 classrooms and additional space for $35 to $40 million, or no, I'm sorry, $25 to $30 million with the athletic fields on the outside of the building, meaning the baseball field, football, and new track. So we have been able to reduce the square footage, include everything that we felt was important for a inherently structural, competent 5 to 8 building for 25 to 30 million. Questions, comments, arguments, rebuttals?
We know who this is all going to now.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if the board decides to go ahead with this, what is your plans for the 5th and 6th grade building?
Very good question. Currently, we have not had that conversation with the board, anyone. We do understand that the building would still be in existence, meaning administration is still located here. We will not move administration. The idea has been floated around of taking parts of this building and converting those into maybe an athletic facility. We have multiple fields around the campus here, improving the administrative office. So these are some things that we'll have to decide internally with the board.
Can we lease this space?
That's the other question.
That's another possibility.
Can we lease it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
We're not going to sell it.
Yes, that was the other question I was just gonna ask.
That will not happen.
Please tell me we're not selling it.
Right,
That
Joe?
will not happen.
What's the timeline to get
We're not
some?
selling it. It's gonna be for a dollar to
The
anybody.
the timeline that we have discussed, we would like to spend this school year with another architectural firm, planning, drawing, preparing for bids, as long as Mr. Schott is in agreement and the board is in agreement.
Is that Hank's farm?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do we still have to pay prevailing wage?
Yes,
Yes.
most certainly. Unfortunately.
With the idea of if we go out for bid in April, possibly by summer, starting the first phase of the renovation,
What's your projected, how long this will take?
year and a half.
Well, how does the process with PDE factor in as well? Because that's a long process as well, as far as public hearings and all those things. That takes, I think, nearly a year to go through.
Well, that's an interesting aspect. One of the items related to that, and this will be something we'll need to get assistance from Access on, is in terms of the additional square footage that we're adding to the building. Most likely, if I find Act 34 per pupil cost limits will probably play into that as well. And there's a calculation that's done specifically related to, I'll say it very briefly, an Act 34 construction project requires a referendum if the maximum building construction cost exceeds the aggregate building expenditure standard. The aggregate building expenditure standard equals the project's Act 34 building capacity times the applicable per pupil cost limit, and they calculate those amounts for us. So as part of that process, that'll be factored into that. Again, it's just another hearing, another part of the process related to that specifically.
There's still the moratorium on.
Yeah, in terms of PlanCon itself, there's a moratorium. This is, I want to say, the third year for it. They are looking at possibly doing some things with it. There's nothing definitive with it. Most likely, we're kind of on our own with that.
We would still submit the application for PlanCon. That way it's on the books, ready to go, if, in case.
Yeah, no, whether, and I honestly, I don't, even some of the other districts that have been doing some projects the last couple of years with the moratorium, they're submitting it. Does that mean that when this new PlanCon comes to light, they'll be eligible to get something back? I don't know with that. It's hard to say at this particular point. I kind of look at it that if something down the road that we actually are able to tap into some additional state subsidies in terms of reimbursement related to new debt service costs, that would be great. But I think going into it, we kind of have to feel that we're not going to get anything for that, and just know that. And if it happens, great. If not, we know that we're moving forward. We have to move forward based on our current conditions for that. A number of different things related to it, and I put some thoughts here without getting too heavy. Currently, we do have two bonds outstanding, two issues. Our series of 2012 non-taxable bonds and our series of 2016 taxable bonds. Now, related to the bond market currently is very favorable. Just to give you an idea, and I've been working with our bond underwriters, Piper Jaffray, since we've done our first deal with them, and constant updates. They actually provide an update as of Monday from the bond buyer index. It's the low for the current year, 3.22 for 10-year bonds. The high, when this was probably calculated, I'm just looking here, probably back in February, was 4.24. So that's already over 100 basis points that it's moved. Now again, when you're talking bond rates, it's a guess. Really, it's sometimes. You really don't know, even if you were going to pull the trigger right now, we really can't definitively say, okay, we're good, we're going to lock in something now, they're going to go up. Or, I mean, it's possible they can continue to go down. That's the part you don't know. But looking back at the historical information they've provided over the last 15 years, going back to 2005, the last low point in terms of a calendar year was back in 2012 when it was at 3.27%. Now, looking back during 2016, it was actually at 2.80%. There was actually a 15-week window when the bond market was between 2.99 and to a low of 2.80. Now, whether we're going to see that again, say in maybe the next 3-6 months, I honestly don't know that. That's one of the chances that we take for that. One of the things that Piper Jaffray had informed me about, in addition to, we've been talking and I've been updating them along the way that we're looking at 25-30 million, obviously closer to the $30 million mark. They've made me aware that regardless of doing anything in terms of new money, we do have a significant opportunity to refinance our series of 2012 bonds. So basically, and we've taken the bite out of that apple a few times, but basically going from non-taxable to taxable, similar to what we did with the 2016 bonds. Similar situation. What I did in terms of doing this a little bit differently than what we did in 2016, if you recall, we took the savings as debt service reduction, which I thought was a great idea doing that. But the one problem we all saw going into this year was the spike when we went back up. So what I did, I had them run, matter of fact, they ran them today. I got these numbers at 4 o'clock, so I'm still digesting them. But the two scenarios I had them run was basically doing a refinance in a similar manner as the 2016 bonds. So you're looking at about 5 years and then it jumps. Or the one that I really like, I like the concept of it and I really like the concept of seeing the numbers, is taking the savings over the entire life of the issue. So there is no spike in that. So we can have consistent savings, roughly $95,000 each year, which is good, which also in tandem with new money helps reduce our overall debt service costs for issuance of, say, a $30 million bond issue. So the other thing that factors in, in terms of, do we want to do these in tandem as opposed to, say, refinancing now, waiting 6 months, a year, doing another bond issue? We could do those together potentially. We could do a refinance and a new money issue. So say, for instance, in theory, Series 2019A, 2019B. A would refinance 2012. B would be $30 million netted out in new money after all the various issuance costs for that. Now, getting into, you're talking $30 million, what does that mean? And I kind of focus in, and again, I want to crunch some more numbers and do some more comparisons.
And this would be without projected savings from closing the building. That's what
Correct.
we need to understand.
That's another thing, and I got a little bit ahead of myself on that.
Yeah.
But one of the other things related to that, there's going to be savings from closing this building. The problem is, we're talking about phasing and doing things we know are going to be over several years. That's not going to be immediate. So, but also we know that we're starting a project, we need to have our funds up front. So unfortunately, what that will do, and again, there's a lot of other factors that factor into it, there will, I'll be blunt and say, there will be a tax increase related to that specifically. Now, just focusing in on new money on one of the schedules, as you can see, it's a busy schedule. There's a lot of a lot of numbers going on. There's a lot other schedules I want to see that tie into this as well. By focusing on, okay, what does that mean in terms of $30 million new debt service? Approximately an increase to our debt service of about $1.1 million. And again, just looking at it in a vacuum, no looking at other savings, other issues. One issue, just a note, again, we do get monies back currently through the old plan con. Unfortunately, and we saw this with Pitcairn, those of you who recall, when we close this building down, we will lose some plan con funds. When I calculated this a few years ago, I went back to my notes, it was approximately $65,000. So that factors into the mix as well. So basically, our set reimbursement rate from our original bond issue, they'll actually recalculate that. That'll actually go down a little bit from the loss of this building being off the market for that.
Meaning the 5-6 building, once it closes, we would still be obligated for.
Correct.
Even if we
amount.
have the administration offices or we're using it for something?
Correct, yeah. When you take the education out of the building, that takes the funding out of the building for that. But
Well,
still,
it's something to think about. You don't have to answer right now. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but is there something we could put in there educational that would allow us to still hold on to the plan con funds if we had some kind of alternative, lesser usage in the building? We might want to think about.
that would
options
probably
for
be, and I'm trying to remember the name of the gentleman there at PD, but they do have one gentleman, he's like kind of their plan con guru. That would definitely be a question for him to be able to see, what types of options for that. But even when I calculate that $65,000 number, again, that was based on, there were still some remaining payments that since then we've paid, obviously, for that. That was based on other calculations. Obviously, market value ratios change. So that may actually be less than that, potentially. It could be a little bit more than that. I'll have to take a look at that a
How
little
many
bit
years
closer.
does that go out? Do you know? How many years?
For the new,
No, for the
the
plan
new
con.
monies?
For
Oh,
the plan con
plan
loss.
con? Well, currently that would go out through 2027. If we wouldn't do anything, 2032 is for the 2012, 2027 is for 2016. So as of right, if we wouldn't refinance anything, issue any new money, all of our debt would be paid off in 2032. But looking at, again, just in a vacuum, about $1.1 million, that equates to about 0.49 mils. And I just grabbed the same number I had that we incorporated in June for the budget. Obviously, that number's changed as well, so that's going to have some. But just to be able to put a number on it and say approximately just related to $30 million, increasing debt service about 1.1 million, approximately 0.49 mils.
Do you want to share the projected savings of shutting down Los Alamos?
We analyzed that. I think it's safe to say in a range between $700,000 and $900,000 per year.
It's really dependent on the portion of the staffing that the new building's going to require for that, and all the components related to that from top to bottom, from administration all the way down to food service to
Everything.
Everybody. Exactly how many staff would we need to move? And obviously, the less we have to move, that's greater savings for that.
I'm just
What-
trying to make sure people
Sure.
are clear. That's not bad, because you're saying the debt service is 1.1 million annually, but the projected savings is
Correct.
700 to
If we-
900,000 annually.
Sure. If we're able to hit near that mark, that would be great. Now, obviously,
It's a
if you could
conservative number as
close
well.
prior to issuing bonds and realize the savings immediately, that would be the ideal situation.
Yes.
But obviously, it's unrealistic to be able to move in that manner for it. So, what I kind of envision, and even though, again, there's a lot of other exterior components that we all know are coming up that we have to deal with that also come into our budget, as well as, we know all costs are increasing. That's just the fact of life for that. Potentially, when we are able to realize those savings down the road, that'll help offset some of those other costs that we even see down the road. So, again, it's kind of some shifting around for that. But again, the bond market is at a very good place. In terms of what we should really consider is, do we want to get in position to potentially pull the trigger on it, at least at a minimum, refinance and or doing a two bond scenario. There is some savings in terms of doing two bonds at the same time in terms of some of the issuance costs. So there's some overlap as opposed to doing something as a standalone for one bond issue that you wouldn't have to do or be able to kind of fall underneath the umbrella of that. So there's definitely some advantages to doing it all at the same time. And obviously taking on new debt and getting savings from existing debt obviously nets us out and gives us a little lower debt service. The other thing that we had them do in terms of the calculations is that when you're talking layers of debt, and obviously layers of debt that mature at different lengths, trying to keep a consistent debt service all the way out through the end of your final series in terms of, in theory, your final payment. Again, assuming that there's never going to be another opportunity to refinance down the road, which you never know. There may not be. That's always possible, but we want to be consistent with that. We don't want to see the big spikes like we saw the big spike this year, ideally, for that. So, again, is today's rate a good rate? Is it going to get better in 6 months? That's the big question. But I look at that as, even looking at the, let's pull this up here just to give you an idea. Looking at the refinancing in the vacuum as of itself, looking at savings of almost 1.2 million. That is very significant. Anytime that we've done a bond issue or refinance, anything over $1 million it's a home run. I think Bruce can agree. He's seen many bond issues over the years. Yeah. And again, even with that, it takes some time to be with that. I mean, we were looking at probably, if we were going to say do something today, and correct me if I'm wrong, officially hire Piper Jaffray, and there's a associated resolution that comes with some advertising. One thing I haven't had a chance to follow up on is whether we would have a public hearing or not on that.
What?
A public hearing related to the debt. I think there is one as well for that. I have to check my notes on that. So again, there's some steps with that. That's just getting it to a certain point. And then obviously the fun part I get is updating the massive booklet with all the financial information, which again, kind of where we're at, we would be using last year's financial statements because I'm just barely even getting into auditing getting an 18-19 ready to go. I've just updated all the required disclosures as of December, so a lot of those numbers will carry forward as well. So again, that will help the process too, since we've been keeping up on a lot of those numbers forward. But again, given the nature of potential savings and what we need, that's definitely something we need to consider in terms of seriously thinking of moving forward and pulling the trigger on that, knowing what's coming for that, to take advantage of the current market conditions for that.
Thank you, Mr. Schott.
Thank you.
For summarizing financial aspect of this. I realize that this is a lot of information for the board to digest, and I respect that, and there's going to be a lot of questions from this information. I think as a group, we put in hundreds of hours, at least finalizing, narrowing in on a scope of a project that is not chandeliers, would not be marble, but merely educational facilities that can last this district and currently upgrade from where we're at with our buildings. So with that, again, I'll ask for any other questions. I'll allow the board some time to reflect on this, and then we'll bring this back with another building and grounds meeting in the next month.
A general question that
Yes.
residents have asked is, what's the downside of doing nothing?
Money has to be spent at some point somewhere.
Okay.
We have placed multiple Band-Aids on the heating, air, roof. Currently, the buildings are not up to code, based on the fact that we haven't touched the buildings in so long. Anything else, Mr. Brown?
We're currently not realizing any of the potential energy savings at the point that they are now with old technology, old lighting. If you've noticed, a few weeks ago, I drove in on Monday morning and we had water running out the front door of this building due to old plumbing within the walls. That was repaired. there's many more of those same aspects within both of these buildings that could go at any given time. We just do not know. We also have the aspect of maintaining both buildings to full heat, full, utilities at all times. So those are additional costs. So if we mothball one, that's gonna drop drastically.
We
All
do
of
know
those
that the track is in pretty rough condition.
Straights at the field.
The fields in general over there are constantly being maintained by your staff, which takes away from some other areas that could be addressed.
I think I apologize
Yeah.
for my voice, or lack thereof. I think my question is pretty close in line with what Mr. Bova asked. My idea of the do nothing is I know there were numbers given about like the minimal upgrades it would
To
take
code.
on both buildings to get both buildings up to code and maintainable. And where does that number fall in comparison to the 30 million for the renovation that we're looking at here?
We have that in the study.
I think I remember reading that somewhere.
Yeah.
Before we get to that question, there was kind of a follow-up question that folks had kind of anticipated that answer, and this is probably an unfair question to you guys, or maybe even to us, but the question generally was, how did we get into this position? Is this just standard decay, or as you just pointed out, was money simply not invested in maintaining the buildings?
That would be part of it. Simply age has a lot to do with it. The years past, monies weren't spent to upgrade everything, so we have realized that, or been realizing that in all the upgrades that we've been doing throughout the district.
And I think it's also important to understand that these buildings, and I don't think Mr. Bova was here when Mr. Telly said that currently within Gateway Middle School, they're operating at 56% capacity within those buildings. Very similar to this building here. So the idea of, we have two buildings operating
Yep,
at 50% capacity.
absolutely. That's
The
how
idea
the
of
conversation
consolidation.
started. Right, yes, and that part makes good sense. One of my concerns is, I assume one of the reasons the buildings weren't well maintained, of course, is financial. So when we commit ourselves to this larger debt service, and I appreciate the projections and the notions that much money is gonna be saved here, there, and everywhere, but I'm not gonna spend much time researching this, but the amount of times those projections come through accurately and fully, I would suggest are fairly slim. Just saying. When someone's selling you something, put this new furnace in, your cost of heating's gonna go down 80%. The amount of times that happens, well, you know. So my concern is that if we commit ourselves long-term to this kind of thing, in 2032, our debt service disappears, which frees up lots of money. If we tie our hands again, someone's gonna be sitting here, probably be you, 20 years from now, and explaining why the building is, deteriorating, because, well, we couldn't afford it, because, the teacher salaries went up, and this went up, and that went up, and we had this big bond, or this big debt service, so, that's all, just a general notion, but
Jack, I think
that's the
this
question.
can has been kicked down the road for years. I mean, my son's
Well,
gonna
which
be
can are you talking about?
the consolidation or building renovations. So my son's gonna be a senior this year. And when I was at Mosside Middle School, when he was in 5th grade, I wasn't sure if that school was gonna be there because there was talks of shutting it down because of all the renovations that it needed. And
I'm sorry, and that was how long ago?
that was 6 years ago.
So,
7
that
years
was
ago.
obviously overstated at least a bit, because
Well, I
it is
think
still there.
the other factor is every 2 years your board changes and your directions can change.
Yep.
And I've learned over the last 4 years that it is very hard to start a project and see it through when every 2 years your board changes and your focus can change. And then on top of that, you have the requirements and the studies. So this is the second feasibility study I think that we've done, isn't it, in 4 years? When Nina was here, we did a study.
We did an internal
We did our own study. And then we did this study, which took 4 to 6 months. So it's not a fast process either.
No, I agree.
But also educationally speaking, the 4 transitions that we have does not help our child,
Yeah, it's
our
too many.
children. It's too many. Kids adjust at the 5, 6 level, and we've seen the peaks and valleys with scores. Then they move over across the highway, get acclimated to a new building, a new culture, older kids. 2 years, boom, they're up to high school. Ideally, you want 3 transitions.
Well, and don't forget too, this board was really all about finding options. And one of the options was, can we sell Gateway Middle School? So we took a year to put it on the market to see if it would bring any money. So again, that adds a whole nother year to the process, which I don't regret doing. I think you only know what a building is worth and what you can get for it when you put it on the market and you see what, you know, the market will bring. And unfortunately, the market didn't bring a good price, so that option became off the table.
Zoned school,
But these are
residential.
not 30-day
Yeah.
processes. They're a year long, they're 6 months long. And you-
I don't think I suggested they were.
No, I'm just trying to kind of put into perspective, why has it taken so long for this to happen? And how did the buildings get into this condition? There's a very complicated and long process, I think, to get where we
Well-
want to go.
Maybe, but for most people, when something decays because of a lack of attention or preventative maintenance, that answer is pretty simple. So,
Yeah,
you know.
but do you want to sink $100,000 or $200,000 into a new heating system in a building that there's talk of closing in a year? Because then people will be like, you just wasted taxpayer money, you're shutting that building down, you just sunk
Yeah,
200
I'm not
grand
sure
into
that
it.
it's an either or, that's that either or, but again, I'm passing on the question from the folks. You guys have answered it to the best of your ability. That's what we do.
So the options pretty much in front of our board is, you know, we continue to maintain what we're doing with our 2 middle schools. At that point, we would then have to bring forward a plan to keep and ensure that the buildings are operational, whether or not that's heating, air, roof, whatever. Or we examine this process of, you know, which we did drop the initial sticker shock of the $62 million option of renovation down to a $25 to $30 million renovation.
Did you find that figure?
Yes. And this is.
Just up the code.
This, well, no, this was a figure that they brought in to do a comprehensive remodeling of each building.
Okay.
Which is probably overkill, to your
remember this.
question. 28 million for Mosside Middle, 33.8 million for Gateway Middle, which equals to 62 million. But that is not what you asked. It was not just brought up to standard. This was
Right.
to totally get
Both
each building
buildings.
up to a higher level.
I would maybe request that, and I know how much work has gone into this. I've been in a lot of these meetings, and I've seen the amount of data and everything as far as class space and everything you guys have all done. But the way we attacked their initial proposal for the $62 million, and we found a way to reduce space to get that number down, can we look at that projection and kind of look at it with the same lens and figure out what that actual number would be for the bare minimum to keep everything going and to, you know,
Don't forget, we're at
responsible.
50% capacity in both of our buildings.
I understand, but just as far as presenting every option to the public and to the board so that we can make the best decision, I think it's important that we know what those numbers are, what they actually accomplish, and how long those buildings would be useful with that number. Personally, I think that looking at that and then looking at the $30 million bond, I think it's still going to lean in favor of the renovation of Gateway Middle, but I'd like to at least have confirmation of that. Is that something we can do?
Yeah, I don't know
Roughly.
that we are capable of giving you that exact number, but with assistance from,
Axis or-
real Axis Architecture or somebody, that they should be able to put that relatively easily together, knowing all this information we already have.
Yeah.
One other thing, Dr. Short, you had
Yes.
mentioned the 2 transitions instead of the 3. Mr. McIntyre had asked a good while ago about making that change by going to K through 5.
K to 5, correct.
And it was, I seem to remember it was kind of discounted pretty quickly, and frankly, I can't remember why.
Certification issues, understanding that the middle school is typically a 5 through 8 certification.
PDE changed certifications too for elementaries. It used to be K through 6, it's now PK through 4. So that if you introduce a 5th grade, you have to make sure that you have certifications that would address 5th grade, whether it be 5 through 8 or K through 6.
Mr. McIntyre, I know we did some quick research. There are a lot of.
There are a lot of
K-5s.
other districts
there are.
with those buildings.
We recognize that, but that kind of pigeonholes certain teachers for certain grade levels.
There's space issues as well. 3 of the buildings we need add-on space in 3 of the elementary buildings.
No, it'd probably be 30 million a building, probably.
Depends on the architect. It's not out of the question, certainly. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
The buildings that we have right now, just like the University Park, which I'm always up there, they're bursting at the seams with their space. So what do you have looking forward down the way to expand to do for them? And what would that possible cost be? I'm just putting it out there since that
Well, there's
is.
2 ways to achieve that. One is redistricting, and one is adding classrooms above the last addition, which was the library. They both, have the pros and cons. The only thing we really could tell you is the renovation at Cleveland Stewart, the cost per classroom that was. Mr. Schott may recall that when we did those costs per classroom, plus an elevator.
I know that whenever I met with Mrs. Neely a couple weeks ago, one of the things that we had talked about is and I believe it's under construction at this point, near someone's home, I might add.
Right across the street from me. Come visit me.
A new housing
A new housing development in Monroeville that's anticipated to have
33 homes.
133 homes. Now, that is the area geographically in the Evergreen location area. Of course, we're going to be monitoring the construction as well as the buyers, the families that would be moving in there. Evergreen currently right now is our lowest populated building, though we have made some adjustments over the last couple of years. We're starting to fill that building. However, if we need to redistrict, that area, of course, would be instrumental to what we look at as far as how we spread out the district. Evergreen, I believe right now, we have a couple grade levels still at 2. So my guess would be 70% capacity.
Plus, there's another high-rise, there's a I don't
I
know what
did
it
hear
is.
that, yeah.
It's a high-rise apartment building, I believe, going in on Evergreen, which is very close to the school. Projected completion date, I'm not sure of, but I don't know what kind of housing that is also going to bring. So in a year or 2 at the most, you could have Evergreen bursting at the seams also. So there's going to be a lot of things that are going to have to be looked at that point, and that's why
Yes.
I asked what you were doing with that building.
Yes.
You and I had the discussion a week and a half ago because of those 2 developments going in over by Evergreen Elementary. There may have to be some redistricting, and there may have to, this building may end up having to be come into use again if we choose to go the avenue of putting 5 through 8 over there. You might have to make another elementary school. I don't know. I don't think it's I think it's a great thing for a district to have. I mean, that says a lot of people want to move into Gateway, and that's saying a lot for your district. So, I mean, I just think it's something.
Absolutely, and fortunately, our 4 elementaries, if you look at the location of those buildings, there are areas that we can expand, either vertically or horizontally, such as UP, Evergreen, multiple space, Ramsey. Exactly, that's the one thing we got to look at.
I'm just saying,
Good question.
the fact right now that, they are at limit. So, right. So how long do you let that go before they do something about that?
That's really up to you folks.
It's administration.
Yeah.
That's you guys.
If we feel we got to redistrict, we will. We check the enrollment almost daily. It's an amazing phenomenon that the people just started rolling in a week before school starts. And
But Ms. Warning did mention this, when I first got on. I remember talking about this, that the University Park was close, and the redistricting idea has been mentioned lots of times. We're told that buses go past that apartment complex near the Giant Eagle, pickup kids go past Evergreen and wind up at University Park.
we've made that adjustment with the last 2 years. So we've taken those students who are now in first grade and kindergarten on that Stroshine Road area and going down towards the old area. I can't think of the name of the apartment complex. And we're rerouting those students to Evergreen right now. We're not taking that route. So we are seeing a reduction of students not traveling over to UB at that time. That's why we're starting to fill up Evergreen right now.
Unless they're siblings.
Correct. You know, we try to keep them in there, to kind of like grandfather certain families in there, not to disrupt them. Mr. Lapsovich?
I got a question for Mr. Schott. This might be off the wall, but you got a good brain. You know, say we approve your $30 million for the building, for the new revelation. Can you take it out in like 3 stages, like 10 million, 10 million, hoping that the next 10 million will be lower than this 10 million?
It's called qualified investments. I mean, there are some options of doing that, but again, then you're taking a risk as well with your investment.
Meaning the bond rates.
Yeah, you just don't know. I mean, it could, I mean, you saw just this year, I mean, it's already dropped 100 basis points. Say if we did $10 million right now, it could go up 100 basis points. It could go up another 100 basis points. So yeah, you take a great risk with that. Honestly, knowing that uncertainty, I kind of shy away from that. I would say pull the trigger on it and you don't look back, type of thing. You make your, given the nature of where it's at, that makes the most sense in relation to where we're at with the process. But yeah, that's a scary proposition from that standpoint, I have to admit, in terms of being conservative with taking that out.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? We said we'll come back to this in September, just to kind of keep it fresh in everyone's mind. We have received information from Axis Architecture that I will share with the board via the Friday board packet. So we'll continue to move forward on this. That's it.
Shall we adjourn and take a 5-minute recess before we?
Yes.
All right.